suggested last week, I'm here just outside the inpatient unit entrance, right in the corner of what is our kitchen garden, in front of a flower bed. That, as I said to you this week, I was going to sort of talk about how to go about reconfiguring, redesigning a flower bed, and the kind of things you need to take into account when you're going to do that. This bed, as I said, had kind of been abandoned for a while, and it had been overtaken by hardy geraniums, which, don't get me wrong, they are lovely, but I wanted a bit more flamboyance and colour to this bed than just hardy geraniums. Obviously I have already done some prep work. I've dug this bed over, took out the hardy geraniums and prepped the area. Now when it comes to you doing a flower bed, designing a flower bed or reconfiguring one, there's quite a few things to take into account. One, you need to kind of take into account where is that bed, and when I mean that, I mean, is it north facing, south facing, does it get full sun all day long, is it part shade, is it in an open area so it's going to get the wind, is it shielded, as in it's kind of covered so it doesn't really get much rain. There's a lot to take into account when you're going to do a flower bed, but those are some of the main things. And like with this bed gets kind of sun most of the day, except up this far corner where I'm standing, which this ends up with quite a bit of shade a lot of the day. It only ends up with the sun on it in the late evening. It's actually quite a dry bed, because it has an overhang of the building. When it does rain, unless the rain is at an angle, it doesn't get a lot of it, and we don't generally water this bed all that much, so it is what I would class a dry bed. We also have to contend with, obviously, the air conditioning units, so this overhangs onto the bed, and I can't be planting, you know, really tall stuff in front of it where it needs to blow and give the staff their air conditioning. So I've got quite a few things I have to take into account here when it comes to the planting. What I then have to kind of decide is what design I want. So what am I going for? You know, do I want to just stick to one colour? You know, do I want to mix it up and have a variation of colour? Do you want to have colour throughout the whole year? So you get some in spring, then some in summer, and then something in winter. Or are you going more just for kind of just low growing plants that require hardly any maintenance, a bit like a hardy geranium, and so on. So you have to kind of think about these things before going about it. Don't just get plants, plant them and hope that they do their best. You do need to think about those kind of things. Obviously I have taken that already into account. I've mulched this bed, so I've given this bed a load of fresh compost. That will just help the new plants I put in to give them their nutrients, but also to help maintain some of the moisture in there while they're getting their roots set and they're growing better. My aim for this bed is to kind of have what I class a multi-level bed, and more like a herbaceous border. So I'm going for kind of the taller plants at the back, either side of this air conditioning unit, and coming down to the really low growing, and right in front of this air conditioning unit will be those that are just going to spread across the ground cover. I'm not going for any tall plants. Again, as I've said before, I'm a person, I like it multicoloured, a mix of colours. When you've got those kind of colours that contradict each other and the contrast, it's just lovely. So I've kind of already had a look around at what plants we've got already grown here that we've grown ourselves, and I've put in sort of at the back for the taller growing ones, I've put in some Verbena. So this is something that will grow very tall and has little purple flowers on it, which the bees absolutely love. There was already some irises in here, which I've left them in. I'm not going to take them out because they are actually very beautiful when they flower in late spring. So I've left them in, and again they're quite tall growing, so they'll complement the Verbena. I've also put in some penstemons. Again, in sort of mid to late summer they'll be flowering with lovely bell-shaped flowers, and I believe this one's called a strawberries and cream, so it's going to be again a reddish and creamy colour, and again the bees love them. Over this side, which was where I'm standing, due to it being more in the shade, I have put a semi-shaded loving plant, which is a salvia, a white one, and again he will be quite fine in there as well. He doesn't mind the dry, so yeah. And I've also incorporated some herbs into this bed, so I've got some variegated sage, I've got a curry plant, again with the silvery leaves, it just kind of contrasts the colour between everything else, and then some herbaceous perennials such as echinaceas, rudbeckias, lobelias, those sorts of things. So there's quite a big mixed bag in here, but as these plants spread, at the moment they're quite small, but as they spread I've given them plenty of room in between each other to give time to spread. Yeah, and I'm hoping in a couple of years this border will look good, as long as it's tended to, de-weeded and looked after now. We should have a nice flower border here. I have just got a few other plants to put in. Like I said, I've got a salvia up this corner, so I'm going to get him planted, and a variegated sage and a echinacea. So I'm just going to get them into the ground. Obviously, take the size of your pot, and obviously what you're aiming for is actually to get what was in the pot below the ground level. You want the top of where the soil was to the same level of the soil that you're now putting it into. Just dig my hole now. Now, if I hadn't already put some compost into all this whole bed, I would be adding a little bit of compost into that hole before I put the plant in. But I'm not going to do that because it has already had it, and I don't want to give it far too much that it suddenly thinks, oh wow, this is amazing, and then in several months' time hasn't got any nutrients. So I'm just going to plant it straight into the ground. Again, as I said, your soil level needs to be at the same level the pot was when the plant was in there. So get him in, just push him down around where the plant is with your foot. That just ensures that if there was any air down there, you're now squashing it out, and you're ensuring those roots are touching the new soil, so they can now start to spread their roots. My next plant is this lovely variegated sage, which I took out of a big clay pot it was in. And again, if you're going to take it from something quite big, I've still got to dig a hole big enough for this to go in, and again the soil level just needs to be the same. So we'll get him in as well. It's obviously very important to know what sort of kind of soil you have as well. You know, if your soil is quite clayey and claggy, as in it doesn't really drain well, then you need to ensure that you get plants that are suitable for that kind of soil. Or it is a case of adding lots of fresh soil and drainage into it. Our soil here is very sandy, which is actually quite a nice soil, but it can sometimes keep the moisture in. So for some plants, they may not like that. So we have added over the years quite a lot of grit and stones into it to aerate it, and obviously year by year we add compost and mulch them in the winter, so they get all that goodness back into the soil. I'll just get this echinacea in. What I like about a lot of these plants, as I've said, are perennial. They'll come back year after year. They don't require too much looking after. Obviously, now I've only just planted them. I will have to water them maybe for a few weeks just to get them going, get them settled into their new home. This echinacea doesn't want to come out. There we go, got him out. And as I say, just tend to the bed to make sure that the weeds aren't growing quicker than your new plants. That's him in. Obviously it's very important to water them, which I will do. That's those in. As I said, you've got to incorporate your surroundings, and as I said, because of this air conditioning unit, I can't have anything tall growing in front of this. One, because it would be battered by the wind when this machine comes on, but also it would just affect the workings of it. So what I've planted is some black Mondo grass, which again is a really low growing grass which has beautifully white flowers, and I've also got some tagetes, which are a tiny kind of little, what I class as a marigold, a really little bushy marigold. So I'm going to kind of fill this area with them, and in amongst all these new plants for this year I'm going to put a few annuals in, just to fill the gaps so that the weeds don't grow too much. So I'm going to put some sweet williams in and some phlox, and they will just fill some of the gaps. Later in the year, my aim is to get in some more perennial plants like foxgloves, so some more taller ones at the back, and give this bed even more colour. But obviously now's not the time, and I haven't got any, but we will be sowing the seeds for the foxgloves hopefully soon. I hope that kind of gives you some ideas. Obviously when it comes to doing it, do plan it. Don't just buy a load of plants and go and put them in and hope that they're going to be fine. Do just research and look into it a little bit. What is it you want? Will that plant be okay there? Because obviously not all plants love full sun, not all plants love the shade, and obviously they're not going to thrive if you don't give them the conditions they need or want. Next week, as I say, what I'm hoping to do is show you, we're going to be sowing some seeds next week, and the seeds, we're going to be sowing our biennial seeds and our perennial seeds, which we'll sow now. They'll germinate, we will overwinter them, and they'll be ready for us for next year. Obviously as a gardener you're constantly thinking ahead, you know, and your job is never done. So we'll be getting those seeds sown next week. I will also do an extra video next week, just a quick one, to show you the hanging baskets we did right at the beginning, our vegetables that are growing in tubs, just to show you how they are doing, so you can see for yourselves whether they've been successful or not. And I will show you our cuttings. Some of them may not have been rooted yet or anything, but I will just show you where they're at, and show you our dahlias as well, which some are flowering. As I say, hopefully one day you guys will be able to come and have a look at this bed and see how well it is doing, and see it for yourselves. But thank you. See you next week.